What brought this to this? Spoiler alert: coups, revolutions, secret ops, and more. Iran and the US used to be the best of friends. From the 1950s to the 1970s, this guy, the Shah, was a VIP in America. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi ruled over a stable ally in a volatile region, the Middle East. Plus, Iran had oil, lots of oil, one of the world's biggest proven reserves of untapped crude. But there was a fatal flaw. The Shah wasn't democratically elected. Not only that, the Shah took power in 1953 in a coup overseen by the US and the UK, toppling a left-leaning democratic government led by Mohammad Mossadegh that was seen by Washington and London as too communist-friendly. Iran received VIP treatment from the US. There was even Atoms for Peace, a 1950s program where the US supplied nuclear technology to Iran. Later, President Nixon sold Iran high-tech weaponry just a few years before the relationship between Tehran and Washington collapsed. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution toppled the Shah, knocking out America's dear friend, replacing his regime with a hardcore Shiite Muslim government that was intensely hostile to the US. Death to America became a national rallying cry. Relations hit a new low in November 1979, when over 50 Americans were taken hostage at the US Embassy in Tehran. They were held for 444 days. When they were freed, the US promised not to intervene in Iranian politics. We asked Negin Shiraghaei, an activist and founder of the Azadi Iranian Network, how widespread this anti-US feeling was in Iranian society.
I think at the beginning of the revolution, maybe the first couple of years, those kind of anti-American, and until the siege of the embassy and then the aftermath of it, there was a time that my parents' generation, there were a lot of people amongst them that were thinking, that the problems that the country had was because of the U.S. intervention, the fact that the Shah of Iran is working basically as a puppet of the U.S. Also, even for that generation, that hostile and anonymity wasn't about completely cutting off links with the rest of them. And that was a narrative that the government was pushing out there. And I think a lot of people became disillusioned with that really quickly afterwards, and especially the hostage-taking crisis took so long. And then you would see the sentiment on the ground, even though people didn't have the courage to put it out there, was changing rapidly.
For many Americans, the hostage crisis was a national humiliation. A young Donald Trump even called for sending US troops to Iran. So, was this a generational thing, something some people never got over?
I think there is a generational aspect to this. It's not that some of this hasn't been inherited, but, feelings change over time. I think in some ways, maybe this is reflected in public opinion. There have been a number of polls showing that the American people are actually not very supportive of this war. And part of it may be precisely about that the generations who have a more immediate sense of this history are disappearing. And the people around the president, many of them really their views about Iran were molded, not just his, but some of them, even younger ones, were molded by these experiences.
Just a few years later, US officials were caught selling weapons in secret to Iran in order to release Americans held hostage by Iran's proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon. It didn't work. The Iran-Contra scandal ensued, and Hezbollah killed 2 of the hostages anyway. So, a pivot towards friendship, or at least cooperation?
I think it could be interpreted as an example, not the only one, but an example of there being back channels, of there being a sense in which Iran, for all of the animosity, for all the adversarial relationship, for all the very violent difficulties we've had with each other, is also, in some sense, taken seriously as a place.
The US may not have meddled in Iranian politics, but when Iran and Iraq went to war, causing hundreds of thousands of casualties, the US backed Iraq. In the 1990s, US President Bill Clinton imposed crippling economic sanctions over Iran's pursuit of nuclear energy, the US suspecting Tehran wanted to build nuclear weapons. Iranian civilians paid the price. Things took a dramatic turn in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks. Iran expressed solidarity with the American people and coordinated with Washington to fight the Taliban. So is this friendship again?
I remember that time quite clearly. I was a journalist in Iran back then, and there was the feeling we had on our side, like as public, it was mixture of agreement and not agreeing, because we as Iranian society, we always have this kind of not being sure how to deal with Islamic Republic, right? So even at that time, people were hoping there might be some sort of hostility towards the Islamic Republic from the American side that would allow, a change of regime. But then at the same time, we were trying reform and trying to change from within the system. And so they were part of the society that was like hoping that there would be an opening.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, turns on a question of, what is the common interest that the United States and Iran might share in different respects? It's an odd question to ask in some ways in the middle of a war with Iran. But, is there a level at which, or are there issues on which the United States and Tehran can be on the same page? We were on the same page when it came to our view about Sunni fundamentalism and al-Qaeda.
You might think this would create some good feelings between the two countries, possibly even lead them back to friendship. But the year after 9/11, in 2002, U.S. President George W. Bush does something very unfriendly. He goes on television to denounce Iran in no uncertain terms, coming up with a new term for Iran, Iraq, and North Korea.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction. These regimes pose a grave and growing danger.
So much for friendship for the time being. That might seem like a hard place to come back from, friendship-wise. But fast forward 13 years, and listen to Bush's successor, Barack Obama, talking about working towards a nuclear deal with Iran.
Just now, I spoke on the phone with President Rouhani of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The two of us discussed our ongoing efforts to reach an agreement over Iran's nuclear program.
Just two world leaders talking on the phone. Sounds normal, but for isolated Iran, it was extraordinary. Iranians took to the streets to celebrate their president's part in the talks. For a little while, it seemed like the temperature was cooling and respect might prevail.
بحثی که با آقای اوباما ما در تلفن داشتیم عمدتاً مسئله هسته‌ای بود. من گفتم در اون تلفن که مسئله هسته ایران نه تنها حق مردم ایرانه و نه تنها بحث توسعه‌ای ایرانه.
But then came Donald Trump's first presidency, and another about-face, like so many before in the U.S.-Iran relationship. Trump pulled the U.S. out of the nuclear deal that Obama had spearheaded.
They cannot have a nuclear weapon. With me, it's very simple.
And reimposed economic sanctions. And then in 2020, assassinated a top Iranian general. But he sounded different on the campaign trail in 2024.
I have respect for Iran. I have respect for the people. I know a lot of Iranian people. They're very smart, actually great negotiators, great business people. They're great people. They're very warm people. I wanted to do, as a country, I wanted to do great.
That didn't last long. 5 months into his second term, Trump ordered the U.S. to join in Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Now there's a spiraling war on, started by the U.S. and Israel in the midst of negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. So, is there ever going to be a way out?
I mean, obviously, there is a hope that somehow this generational change, which we talked about earlier, will somehow work in a positive direction. That, and it is pretty obvious that there is, large parts of Iranian society, especially young people, just aren't willing to support this regime anymore for very good reasons. Is there still a very potent sense of Iranian nationalism? Clearly, I think there is. Is it possible to somehow spur, provoke, encourage change at the level of leadership in Iran without stirring up so much of a nationalist reaction that you're, in a sense, back where you started from. Very unclear.
I think two important things happened during Islamic Republic to Iranian psyche as a nation. And the first one is we became disillusioned with religion and the role of Islam in our society. So the younger generation, the 14, 15, 16 years old, who are on the streets, who's been killed, their parents, their younger siblings, they're not going to look outside to find an enemy. They have the enemy next to them inside.
That was the feeling Trump appealed to in the early hours of the war, when he urged Iranians to rise up and take control of their government. But without much of a plan, it seems, to make it happen. In the meantime, friendship seems a long way off, no matter how much many Iranians may want it.